But William Tyndale and John Hyde, which I am going to explain to you right now about what dream I had about John Hyde, okay? Men like William Tyndale and John Hyde, Mamela, was so righteous. They were so consecrated that nothing shook them. They dismembered their entire lives and traveled across oceans just to did what they needed did, because God was the one that placed that thing on them. He's the one that laid all that on them. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so the man died for what he believed in. And when he died, instead of lamenting that, oh my, look, God, they're killing me, he prayed that, listen, he was still making disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. He was still on a gospel mission. He was still trying to proliferate the baton. And so he intercedes in his dying. Hey, Bachung. The effective fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. If at all you're super pious and consecrated and you pray a prayer even in whimpering because you're weakened by persecution, and this is your dying prayer, the Lord will go and grab the very same king that sent you to the gallows to print the first ever English translated Bibles in the world. Because of William Tyndale, we now have the ESV, the NIV, the NLT, the NASB, I could go on. This is the work of William Tyndale. This is the work of William Tyndale. And y'all, that level of righteousness for me is frankly what it is that can account for Maslow's perception, seeing as he was wise enough yet far gone in that wisdom of the world to figure out that these are the layers of the human experience. He figured out that there are a people that finally get to a point of so much contentment in something bigger that they will lose everything for it, because this is all that matters. And they will end up singing Pina Ele that I sang the other day. I'm not here for blessings, and Jesus, you don't owe me anything more than anything that you can do. I just want you. I'm sorry if I've just gone through the motions. I'm sorry if I've just sang another song. Take me back to where we started. I'll open up my heart to you. I sang about that in my other video. When a Christian is so abused, so beleaguered, and yet they're holding on to Jesus, is just so lofty that nobody can budge them from it. They start to essentially keta all that which has caused them a severity of disquiet and say, nothing else will do. I just want you. Nothing else will do. They get to a point when they say nothing else will do because, listen, whom have I in heaven but you? Earth has nothing I desire besides you. Where am I gonna go? They want me to leave God. I can't. He's just burning in my heart. You know how Jeremiah says that your words are like a fire in my heart. I can't do nothing but speak. So when your heart is burning with the words of God, and people are so futile in trying to make you walk away from the Lord, if at all they feel as if though in their futility they will starve you to death just so you can walk away from God and recant your faith, you will die praying that after I die, change their minds. After I die, may the King. That's what William Tyndale prayed, and his heart be softened. And then the King James Bible was printed. You will pray a prayer in dying because you realize that you don't know what in the world they're doing. You get fashioned in the likeness of God to a point where you can be to your enemies all that magnanimous and say, forgive them, Father, for they don't know what they're doing. Such that some of the people that cried, crucified him, after becoming great, getting saved, after becoming Christians. The very people that put you at the gallows to die, to hang, end up repenting and regretting their feats. The very people that were the chief of sinners that ended your life end up going en route Damascus and getting born again. If at all your prayers in so dying are such a thing as that, if at all you intercede for a people that for the life of you are burning you at the stake, the very man who lit that torch might next year basically tell of, I often wonder how William Tyndale, who knew what was his last prayer? Who knew? Likely someone that God kept alive as the man was about to be hung at the gallows, heard him utter this prayer and so shared it in his story, because his execution was a public one. One of his executioners likely overheard this, because we don't speak by telepathy. We don't gauge things in the sky upon sniffing them. This is information that gets conveyed by human beings. So who in the world overheard Tyndale's last prayer as he was about to be hung? Likely one of his executioners. You don't know what your death, for this, the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. Who in the world is alive enough to hear or hearken, even intandazo yako, to a point where it is that it'll be communicated in history, because God has made sure that that's a thing. That before Tyndale died, he prayed for King James to publish his book, to publish the Bible in English. And that's what happened. That's self-actualization. That is essentially getting to a point where it's not so much self-actualization, but the recognition of who mankind is, who they ought be, and what is their state when they are just done for, consecrated, entirely sutured to God. It is not so much self-actualization as it is God realization. That is the last pinnacle of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, when a person is chilling, perched on a ceiling, just kind of hanging at the very surface of that pyramid, you cannot grab somebody with that much purpose, having entered heaven, and it's just hanging there all the day long. You can't take them and make them inyasi of some insincere guy that doesn't know God. Mamelang, I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I am too godly. And the thing that made me super godly is this very attrition. It is this very persecution. Before I was entered into the sorrow, I already had a deep and a severe conviction that God is. No one can ever divorce me from that. No one. And so anybody trying will only ever suture me closer to God, because I will only ever cry out to God when my pain gets that much more extreme. And so therefore, the more you push me, the more I pray. And the more you push a person that is in pain, that is also, however, really righteous, the more you cause intercession for a nation, a land, a people that will uproot structures that are frankly impossible to uproot. You have made me an excruciating intercessor, because I am not only praying all the day long in tongues, apparently for myself, but it appears for many. I am carrying a weight of some people, a nation, on my shoulders. That's what God keeps saying to me. And so in carrying this weight, I am of course a thumpy, thunderous, like footstep of an elephant in an occult practitioner's bedroom, to a point where it can justify to men, however, confusing everyone else that is not spiritual. Why this here needs to be done to a woman that has nothing to herself. Why a woman must be so beleaguered and closed in on all sides. People in the occult have understanding as to the spiritual power of Christians, and they know what they're dealing with. So when a person is enduring a most bizarre life, only look at their constant consecration to God Almighty and what it is that they're going through. Measure it with what they're likely doing to the kingdom of darkness. Recognize the excruciating persecution of a Christian to a point of murder, as she was too much or he was too much to stay. She or he was too much to stay alive. So they gotta be eliminated. The height of persecution of a Christian is evidence of who knows them. Not only, of course, God, but Satan himself, who I believe does not know every Christian. Only those that are just menaces to his kingdom, that have been called to very hot capacities in God, and only those that are known not only by God but Satan himself. And not only that, but just occult organizations, cults globally, cults in the world. If at all they know some little old lady, grab a magnifying glass and gaze at the workings of this lady and what their job is and what they're doing, what they stand to uproot, what they stand to bring forth, and realize that this makes sense as to why they're trying to do this to this woman. William Tyndale essentially affected our ability to understand the Bible in a language that we know. And so listen to the red letter, listen to Christ himself, listen to the, what do they call these people? The prophets by ourselves, without all the apocryphal interpretations of the Catholic Church, those who made themselves Jesuits, those who made themselves vicars of Christ, those who made themselves the only interpreters, those who stood at pulpits in Algiers insisted on teaching us the Bible. And unless you were living in Latin America, able to understand Latin for the life of you, you would not be able to read some of the texts of these preachers. And even then, they were not available for the common man on the street. Only the acquisition of scholars that hoarded knowledge and made themselves the only dispensers of it, therefore subject to human folly and interpretation. And then God raised up a righteous man that was unbiased, that was truly beloved of God, and in and of himself loving the Lord, a man that would not want to hoard the glory of being a priest that understands Latin himself, but shared it with everybody else. He saw that this here ought not be held and contained amidst priests, because the gospel was to be preached to all the lands, and then the end would come properly. In Greece, the letters were written in Greek, so the Greeks could understand every last letter. The Bereans could read the Old Testament, the Torah, everything, and understand it. And yet the Gentile populations that the gospel would actually be proliferated to, the Gentile populations across the world didn't understand Greek, Latin, Hebrew, none of that. So the gospel was just this like jibber jabber to us. It was just this bunch of really hard to understand text, but people nonetheless went to churches because they were thirsty for religion, thirsty for God. The Lord saw this thirst, he saw this hunger, and he saw the need for people to have a communion with God in person. For there is only one mediator between God and man, his name is Jesus. And yet herein lies these men trying to make themselves mediators between God and man. They are not giving the words of life. Christ himself went around speaking to the disciples his own words, and they understood them. And yet people were withholding from us, those who would be the disciples of the future, his words. And Tyndale saw that, and the Lord gave him that passion, and he interpreted it. I mean, this is a massive job. This here is a massive job. And men that had massive jobs always got martyred. A lot of them. They got martyred, or they were starved, they were imprisoned, they were known by Satan. And the devil knew that if at all the work that this man is doing goes out, Mamela, if it succeeds to do what it is that it wants to do, my kingdom is going to be that much more decimated. People are going to have that much more understanding. Curiosity for the things of God are going to be that much hotter. And evangelism is going to be that much easier to do by the regular man on the street. And so therefore, paganism and secularism is going to fade that much more hotly. I have to do everything in my power to stop this thing. So herein lies Satan betraying Tyndale through a friend, a man that cloaked himself as a friend, just as he was about to finish writing the New Testament. But it was too little too late, because ultimately we have all of it. We have the Old and the New Testament. We've got the whole entire Bible. Listen, William Tyndale did all that. It was too little too late. God knew that if it all, like, he'd already done most of the work. His work was done. He got betrayed. He got taken to the gallows. Somebody else wrote the rest of the Bible, but it doesn't matter, because we had enough. We had enough. There are people that only have the Psalms. There are people that only have the Proverbs, and from that alone they get born again. There are people who only have the book of Timothy, and from that alone they get born again. There are people who have smuggled in just only one book, the Acts of the Bible. And from that alone, they get born again. So, I mean, the work that William Tyndale did was out here creating a global epic revival that would give people, never mind just the Acts, the Apostles, not just the Acts or the book of Romans, the Proverbs or the Psalms, but everything. What are you going to do with that? So now today, when you sit around out here underestimating this here Bible, know and understand what in the world William Tyndale had to go through in order to give it to you. The man died for his faith, and it has been printed. And now you have access to like 2 of them. Look at me, hanging out with 2 of them, 3, if anything, over there, and another one in my car. Yeah, when you've got all this, all up in your possession, Mamela, you are severely without excuse, all right? When the Lord God Almighty then says to you, depart from me, work of iniquity, when you grab an interpreted English Bible that told you these here are an abomination to God, do not partake in these acts, do not interpret omens, go through the fire, be an astrologer, partake in sorcery, don't do these things for they're an abomination to God, do not partake in homosexuality, don't do ABCD. You've got the whole entire Bible, and you have no regard for what God put a man through to get it to you. When you get told, depart from me, understand William Tyndale will be a witness against you in eternity. I was raised up by God to interpret the Bible so you can understand it, and you still did witchcraft. The people were with excuse in the days prior to William Tyndale to argue mix Christianity with ancestors because they didn't know any differently. They were with the excuse to mix Christianity with witchcraft. God sent for them William Tyndale. Now that you have him and you have the Bible interpreted, what excuse do you have to read the Bible, nitpick at it, and choose to ignore certain facets of it when a man was put through all that and even martyred for the sake of getting the whole Bible to you to let you know that walk away from sexual immorality, flee from homosexuality, get away from ill-gotten gain, get away from sorcery, get away. Don't do tarot cards. Do not read your horoscope. Do not. When the Bible makes it clear that this is what is real and you understand it with crystal clarity, to a point even when you've got a Bible yasezulu, you've got one yasetswana, you've got one yasepedi, you've got one Afrikaans, and you still, my dad had like an Afrikaans Bible and he was still so reprobate, he was still so rebellious. I don't know if he got born again towards the very end of his life, one of which was the Bible. That was an Afrikaans Bible. That was my dad. If at all my dad died in his sins, William Tyndale will be a witness against him, because thanks to his interpretation that ultimately gave us the King James, there then was the Bible, there then was Bibele, there then was Bible, there then was the Bible, the Holy Bible. You are without excuse. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so given that God endures his saints through what it is that they are endured through, to get them to that pinnacle where they're so God actualized that they will die praying that you will still be evangelized, and you still insist on killing them, or you hold on to your guns, or feel grateful and high five when they finally pass away. Y'all, I can't even fathom what your eternity looks like. I cannot even fathom what your eternity looks like, because you are without excuse. Old school society is ridiculous. You've got access to so very much, and yet you choose not to walk rightly as you ought. The Lord has called you and you have seen it fit to ignore the living daylights out of him. So let's then go to Freud's theory of the psyche, which then presents this particular problem. You are ignoring people's needs. You are ignoring people's, what do they call this thing? Like progress, okay? You are ignoring people's journey in trying to find God. And you are standing in the way of it by throwing them things that are ornate, shiny, that also go bump in the night because they're hauntings. You're causing people to ignore God in favor of just a discombobulated hierarchy of needs where you've got the pinnacle at the bottom and the bottom at the top, or rung number 3 is at number 2, where you're trying to make people ignore their need for human affection. You are also robbing people of affection so they will be with you by any means necessary just to get food. You're just messing with the order of life. Even though Maslow coined it, frankly he did, it's just that he was not prepared to go and finish that journey by saying, therefore thus saith the Lord. Sigmund Freud then goes and diagnoses your human condition even further with the theory of the psyche to help you understand. Frankly, God helping you understand through even his philosophies, that is Sigmund Freud, his theories, his hypotheses. He then goes on right ahead to explain to you why, oh why, under heaven, oh humanity, you are so base, and why you just keep on reverting back like 4C hair after a silk press to your coily tendrils of sin. Why you keep on reverting back to wickedness even though you have been granted, now that you're in 2025, big fat chunky supermarkets that have got refrigerators that put canned frozen beans, frozen lentils, and frozen fish therein in order to preserve your food for days on end, such that even when there are 3 days of drought in your country, you will not endure a famine. You will endure a famine, but you will not endure hunger. You will not endure a starvation. Now that you've got all this food, thanks to your lack of God, nonetheless you still revert back to evil, to go back to the ancient days where you were without food and so really barbaric and so trying to acquire land and food. Now, however, you have plenty of food and so you don't gotta be so violent. Be content. And yet you are bringing back that old school violence where you're taking what you want anyway. In the old school, men used to kill men and take women as wives. They used to rape women, and because they were raped, these ladies then qualified as this man, if at all he wanted, he was an honest man, he would take her as a wife. But then laws changed and gave women mercy because God saw in the hearts of women, just like with the daughters of that man in the Bible that were given an inheritance of land, that women were not content to be raped following being raped then, upon being that violated in their bodies. Marry the men that violated them. This here is a criminal. This here is a criminal that should be in jail. It's a criminal that should be in jail. This is the sense of justice that the woman will feel. If this man, even though I can't get my virtue back, I will certainly be able to get sleep at night because he went to prison for 15 years, for 20 years, for 25 years, for violating my body, taking me by force. Societies ultimately incarcerated rapists, put them behind bars, as opposed to let them merely walk around holding the hand of their rape victim as a wife, as a bride, a woman that on her wedding night is still gnashing her teeth because this idiot went into me by force. A woman that cannot even look at her husband in his eyes because you raped me. She cooks him dinner and gives him a plate of food. Can't even laugh and smile at him because at the end of the day, he will always be her violator. He will always be her violator. But she's married to him. She's giving him children. These kids are inheriting their dad's generational curse of force on women. So he will always be that chauvinistic, misogynist, 2 girls. So my son is going to rape the daughter too. He's going to rape the daughters of other women. My kids are just going to inherit their, yeah, but like, listen, he's my husband. Yeah, but then God saw that pain. He saw the folly of mankind in that fashion and then caused mankind to wear wisdom enough to come up with court systems, legislation, essentially justice, that would award rape victims the kind of justice that actually started to heal them instead of just endure them through the perpetuated PTSD of their rapist being in the household. And so now we've got these systems that we have, and God therefore stayed his hand from being excruciatingly wrathful like he was in the Old Testament. And then you go back to the days of Shechem, for real. You then ignore legislation, for real. You now don't care. Yet again, you're raping women and then taking them as wives. Indeed, that's what you're doing? Okay. Then endure the judgment that fell on Shechem, killed by the brothers of Dinah. And even though this brought a great deal of calamity in the household of King Jacob, nonetheless, that is what God did in effecting justice for women in the Old Testament when there were no courts. Now there are courts, so God is chill and standing, letting you basically put to practice your laws that you put down in your statutes signed by your presidents. But then when you decide, then you make a decision to say, okay, I don't know, I want her though. You don't get to do that in 2025. But if you do it, and you're countries' laws don't care to effect justice because Mamela, one of your presidents, was a crazy polygamist that ought to be making black men entitled, then die like Shechem. Have matters taken into people's hands as a result of God inspiring wrath in men that are going to show you that while you might not care that Dinah was taken by her rapist, God does. And so God will put a great deal of wrath inside Simeon and Levi, and they will go and just kill the dude. And the rest of the brothers, given that Simeon and Levi were now dead, not dead, but had killed Shechem and his dad, taken Dinah back, they then went and killed the rest of the men of that town. Because proper, they're gonna come for us now, so we gotta kill them. That's why the rest of Joseph's brothers, the rest of Jacob's sons joined in the battle. But it was the immediate brothers of Dinah that did this thing. Immediate brothers of Dinah did this thing, and that's the reason even why there was a curse basically pronounced on Yena, Simeon, and Levi for that era, because he was upset, Jacob, when he was blessing them there towards the end of his life when they were in Egypt. But nonetheless, we see in that story that God will, by providence, raise up what is his true sentiment about an issue if you have no self-control. Therefore, if your nations are trying to give brides to their rapists, God himself will take up the cause of those ladies. If at all your nation is out here saying that if a woman's mother and father, everybody, family members have passed away and they have no brothers, I guess it is what it is. They're going to have to live like a widow if they don't get married. The Lord will be compassionate enough to award this woman land so she can self-provide. If nobody will marry her, and if there's no relative male remaining that can actually take care of her and make sure that she is safe, the Lord will have compassion on her and say, I will give you land. That is our God. He cares for the issues that men and women overlook, glide right by. And if you decide to bring back old school hardship on women and old school hardship on men that have no money on the poor, where your structures are no longer, thanks to your government's legislation, actually eradicating pain on the ground and effecting justice, then God will effect it in a very Old Testament fashion. And when he does that, listen, you are dealing with a most catastrophic, a most cataclysmic, biblical comeuppance for you that is going to shake the world. It is going to shake the world as we know it. And I am going to explain to you what in the world I'm talking about right now. It's 10 minutes past 7 in the morning, and I don't want to speak too much longer because my phone is going to start overheating when the sun starts to rise even further. So we need to try and seal this message. Freud, in his theory of the psyche, came up with this ID, ego, and the superego. The ID is basically the seat of your basic instincts. So that which I spoke about in the hierarchy of needs of Maslow. Eat, 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 drink, drink, drink. These are your basic instincts, and even Freud agreed that they are seated in the ID. You need to pee, so you go. And babies operate largely when they've just been born in the ID. They need to pee, so they go. They need to poop, so they go. They need to eat, so they cry. No self-control. They're babies. But as you get older, you get what we call an ego. That's why Beyonce Archer did a licentious song speaking about how you've got a big ego. An ego is essentially a self-awareness of what you are. And so far be it from me, listen, to be pooping in my pants when I need to go. I'm gonna use a bathroom. Far be it from me to be peeing in my pants. I'm gonna use a bathroom. Far be it from me because I'm hungry. Just stop working, drop everything, a break on a scaffolding as I am a construction worker, and just go and get a sandwich because I'm hungry. Far be it from me. I'm a man, I'm a person, and I'm respectable. So what I'm gonna do is wait for lunchtime, and then I'm gonna eat only then. That's the ego. It out here regulates and guards, at which point constraints, essentially variables that cannot be excelled as to how you're gonna effect the desires of the ego. You don't just poo in your pants, you're big now, use a lavatory. Yeah, but then there is the super ego, and the super ego is the one that accounts for societal opinion. So yeah, very well, you're a man, and when you need to go, seeing as your ego will not let you pee on your own pants, you will certainly expel the fluids of your body out there in the wilderness somewhere. But if at all nobody sees what's going on, I'm just gonna pee on a wall. But first I'm gonna God coast. Or as a woman, I'm back from the nightclub. We've done that before with my friends. Back from the nightclub, too far away from a garage anywhere. Pressed to pee, having drunk a chunk of alcohol. So we stopped the vehicle on the N1 highway, guided coast, opened the door. One chick stood up to check the coast further while another one squatted to pee. I mean, this is at night. Nobody would do that during the day, even if the door was open and someone was guarding coast, because during the day there's plenty of cars passing. During the day, there's plenty of vehicles passing, and during the day, there not only are plenty of vehicles passing, but it's like broad daylight. So the odds of you getting busted are just like haughty. And seeing as it's entirely societally unacceptable for you to be found squatting, peeing in public in front of people, you could even get arrested. You out here would not do it if at all people could see you. You have regard for society and what society thinks about what you're doing. But if at all you can give yourself a veil of concealing, if you can conceal yourself, if you can give your deeds a veil of anonymity, if you can cloak your activity that is base from society seeing it, you will do the most. So essentially, the superego accounts for your morality, however, insofar as you can smile for a photo op, insofar as you're in front of a camera. Otherwise, you're gonna pee in public, but during the day you would not do it because there's just too much light outside. So you will wait, being pressed to pee, feeling like you could even pee in the vehicle. Do you understand what I'm saying? Wait to get to a garage. Your ego is the reason why you hold your bladder until you feel like it can burst. And your super ego is the reason why you, in spite of how desperate you are, will not stop your car in broad daylight and pee right there with motorists watching you. You are indeed with great enough ego to expel urine from your body without peeing on your pants, but the super ego makes you get to garage by any means necessary. The super ego is what also embarrasses you when, in spite of your attempts to conceal the shoddy activity as you are publicly peeing, when the police nonetheless be like, doo-doo, and stop behind you for public indecency. You thought you were hiding, but the police saw you from far away. And then they stopped behind you and saw you peeing in public and then arrested you anyway. The superego is the thing that makes you embarrassed to tell the story. The superego is the thing that makes you feel humiliated that you got caught anyway, even though you thought you were hidden. The superego essentially regulates your behavior in society, how it is that you conduct yourself based on what people will think. And when I read this theory of the psyche, upon me getting born again eventually later on in life, I was like, listen, I got one up on you, Freud. I will give you a superego squared. The superego stays you from peeing in public when people are seeing. But then there's like what I call a superego squared that stays you from peeing in public even when no one is watching, because after all, do you not perceive that God is the true superego? Not so much the eyes of humanity, but the eyes of God. The human race gets only to the point of Freud's superego, where because of fear of man and fear of society, they will keep themselves largely in a bunch in public. They will keep themselves largely in a bunch in public, but if at all they can shroud themselves behind a veil of secrecy, whatever, listen, I don't gotta do anything good. I don't gotta do anything right. I don't gotta do anything normal, neither regular or ordinary. I don't gotta. And so absence of godliness, that's why I get a psychology. I got mad respect for it, but it's only half the story. Absence of the acknowledgement of God. Mankind will only do that which they perceive is right, insofar as they perceive the human race thinks it is right. And so in order to gain favor from fellow man, will act in a particular way. But fellow man, are you not flaccid? Are you not fluffy? Are you not vacillating? And are you not changing? And is that which you imagine right not always just permutating? Is it not perpetually mutating? Mankind, there is no end to how many variations of what is good and what is wrong you can innovate as the human race. Just a couple of decades ago, homosexuality was illegal. Recently in the US, just within these 20 teens, was not so much legalized, but marriage between a man and a woman was no longer the law over there. And now gay people can marry. That is the same also reality in my own nation here, that is South Africa. Men and women, and anything at all of a weird, strange nature can marry. In the common law in this nation, there is also a threat of infiltrating polygamy to be allowable not only under the customary law, but also under common law. These are the things that we're facing. So mankind comes to an agreement that this is wrong, and then they come up with legislations largely inspired by religion, by God, by conviction in their hearts that is written the law of God on their hearts and based on the ramifications of their past actions, and so therefore the bearing of consequences, they then legislate so as to eradicate these things from happening again. The United Nations was formulated in order to essentially make sure that nations don't mutually destruct, because that's what happened after that bomb, Hiroshima, or Japan. They were like, listen, we've got such hectic weapons that now we can self-destroy. Let's basically come up with a confederation of nations that's going to ascertain that we're always at peace with each other, allied and selling each other's bananas and peaches, so we don't mutually destroy. We've gotten to a point now where everybody's got nukes, but everybody's been kept in a bunch by global peace deals. But humanity is evil, and they keep on changing their minds as to what makes sense. Indeed, I agree that mutually assured destruction is problematic, but like with mutually assured destruction being problematic, there also then is the era, do you understand what I'm saying, of mankind being in disagreement now as to what makes for soundness within marriages, right? The laws that reconcile us, the laws that bring us together, also at some point divide us, because mankind is depraved and they keep on glitching and twitching, withdrawing like a drug addict, right back to their sinful desires. They just want to eat, drink, fulfill their most basic instincts. And so if at all your countries legislate away from gay marriage. At some point, enough gays will riot and stand and picket on a rooftop until people understand where they're coming from. After all, are they not just human too, like you and me? And then you start to become a little bit loose in those particular legislations, where it is that you will come up with laws to concede to legality of gay relations. You first concede to the legality of these relations, and then years down the line, you also do away with marriage being between one man and one woman. You will remember how Joe Biden and Barack Obama at some point believed in marriage being between one man and one woman. They have ever since then changed their minds because of society changes its minds. The superego is there, indeed, to regulate our actions, but like absent of there being an absolute truth coming from the superego squared, which I call God, we're going to be dealing with mankind changing their minds as to what is right. And so we are getting a whole bunch of gay people getting married all over the show. Or not similarly too, with mutually assured destruction. The world ended up just formulating all these charters speaking about what weapons they're now allowed now in war. What can you bomb a country with? What can you shoot a nation with? So we go from saying, listen, let's not destroy each other. But because mankind just likes shooting each other, pring, and because it got too taxing to actually call everybody a war criminal, it then became worth the while for international bodies to come up with charters as to when then you do go to war, see as you insist, right? These are the weapons that make sense, but you can't use carpet bombs or you can't use dirty bombs. You can't use this, you can't use that. Now there's like global concern pertaining ICBMs with nuclear warheads because they are mutually assured destruction type weapons. But aren't people just itching to press those buttons? They're itching to press them. So what then becomes the law? Once somebody is so itchy and so pressing that button that they now want to press it, are they not going to say, okay, I don't know, like, maybe shoot it into outer space. I don't know, maybe, like, yeah, if there is no absolute law or absolute morality as to what is right and what is wrong and what ought to be done and what ought not be done, what we are going to be dealing with in these 2025 streets is just looseness pertaining what laws are. Therefore, in our countries that are democracies, where there's freedoms of religion, in our nations that are democracies where it is freedom of religion, freedom of speech, all around freedoms, just handing them out like smarties, freedoms, there then is going to be a perceived threats coming from left, right, and center, and bigotries rising up in the human race that want their ideology to be the dogma, that are then going to create fascist, draconian, and dystopian countries that are very Orwellian, nightmarish, and full of surveillance, where states are going to, in the interest of peace and security, take away democratic religious countries, nations that are Christian, essentially, however, also democracies, and allowing other people to practice their faith without interruption, without being scared, without being treated like dingy dust. They're gonna go from that to saying, but gay people want to also be willing to get married. After all, did you not concede on that at some point? Okay, whatever, get married. Our laws have changed, but I still get to evangelize on a soapbox that homosexuality is wrong. Okay, fine, whatever, do you? You've got a freedom of religion until a few years down the line. In Canada, they want to do away with secularism. They want to do away with the outward displays of religion to a point of trying to take away religious outfits being worn by people like Muslims. In offices, you don't get to go there with your hijab. I don't care what your husband says. That is a total comprehensive infringement of a human right over there. But it is being infringed because that is the threat. Just the appearance of Islam is actually freaking everybody else out, right? So for those reasons, you are going to go and tell a Muslim woman who is facing a dichotomous danger, where it is that if she doesn't wear the hijab, she's going to get grief from her family. But if she wears it, she's going to get grief from her boss. I mean, like, where can the lady go? Where can she go? You are on that day trying to force her to become a Christian, aren't you, Canada? You're trying to force her. And everybody knows that if you don't gently evangelize people and give them a choice to choose today whom they will serve, as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. If you don't give them a choice to choose the Lord and they feel coerced to do it, they will not love him. They will only feel like he's a draconian restriction. They will feel like he's a fascist and a despot. And that's not how God redeems. That is not how God calls. God gives you a chance to love him. He gives you a shot to say yes. He doesn't force you. So when nations are forcing people to embrace certain religions, they're only making women seasonally content to be sitting in the house wearing a hijab in a Muslim country. But later on, they're gonna rebel, take off the hijab, and find themselves dead in a ditch, having been killed by their mom and dad, having been killed by their brother and dad, as a service to Allah. That's what happens in nations that are fully Islam or fully Christian. It is a problematic construct that cannot exist in a world prior to the second coming of the Lord Jesus Christ and him establishing his righteous reign. Only he can enforce essentially the tantamount of only Christ can effect the tantamount of full-on Christian nationalism. Before then, you need to just leave Muslims alone with their big fat chunky hijabs. Insofar as they're not violently out here doing jihad in our streets, let them be. Let the Hindus be. You will evangelize them and give them the gospel. Tell them they're on harm's way if they stay on this broad road. But if they don't want it, listen, I'm not going to force you. If it is possible, I'm going to live at peace with my fellow man. So Hindu that don't want Christ, listen, it's unfortunate. I'll see you in eternity. Goodbye. Dusting my feet off. But do you continue with your Shiva statue and its many hands? Do you? I'm not going to give you grief, and you're going to work with me in corporate. We'll smile at each other insofar as we don't talk about religion. We'll agree to disagree. I've dusted my feet off, but you're my colleague, and I will serve you in that fashion, in that capacity. Nations like those have always thrived. So when you undo and unravel all that, you are evidencing that it is not enough for us to be dwelling only in the superego. Because the superego only cares for man's eyes, but man's eyes are flaccid, fluffy, changing, vacillating, plus the heart of man that also hosts these eyes is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? The heart of man has got jealousy, that anger is overwhelming, pertaining, and fury is a flood, but no one can stand against that jealousy. The heart of man is like, the eye of man is like Sheol and death. It never says enough. It never says, like death and Sheol, the eye of man is never satisfied, so mankind will just keep on changing. They're not immutable. But we serve a holy God who is immutable. He is unchanging. He is the Alpha and the Omega. He knows the beginning and the end. And he cares for the needs of men, women, and children, enough to give women land, enough to give men the ability to have affection toward wives and acquire land that they might marry, and enough to give children their own resolve, enough to give children their own thoughts, even when they have evil parents like King Josiah. That's how the Lord ought to be taking care of widows, orphans, abandoned folk. The Lord is the superego squared. He is the only eyes that you ought to be concerned for he is the only immutable, unchanging law that will always agree that homosexuality is wrong, always agree that mutually assured destruction is wrong, that will always agree that this, always agree, always agree. The Lord will not ever create concessions pertaining his moral law, his righteous law. While the laws of men pertaining men's matters, the Lord could alter based on changing times. Like with the daughters of Moses, his moral law will never change. In other words, the adoration of his precepts pertaining loving your parents and honoring them, loving your fellow man as yourself, having only one God, worshiping no idols, not hooking up graven images, all that jazz, no adultery, hey, no false witness. All his laws, his moral law is and will absolutely in all its entirety always be just fixed. Do you understand what I'm saying? And that moral law is what chills on our consciences. That moral law is what chills on our hearts. That moral law is what's written on our hearts. And that moral law cannot change, and indeed has never changed. We are the ones that change. And so because we change, the superego is not enough. Meaning that in order to satiate the needs, the drives of food and the drives of food, of clothing, of security, whatnot, mankind will change their minds as to where it hangs out in the hierarchy of needs, insofar as they have an alternative theory to posit to Maslow. You know how I went and grabbed the drive of sex that Maslow and Freud put up there with the rest of them, like down there rather, like just a basic instinct, basic need. And I argued that as women, we don't have that kind of sex drive as men, so you cannot possibly put that need down there. Men have to have more self-control pertaining sex, and people in total need to understand that sex is within the confines of marriage where it is allowable. Otherwise, everything is just burning coals. And then down here in these streets, getting you food and what have you. Far be it from you to go and create an Orwellian nightmare where you will feed a person insofar as they will agree to your ideology. Because on that day, you're creating an antichrist system that ultimately no man will be able to buy or sell unless they have a mark on their forehead or in their right hand. It all gets there when you just hang out and chill, park, boom, base camp at superego. You are on that unfortunate day without recognition of the fact that it doesn't end here. There is God, and he's got a moral law that is absolute. And if at all you base camp at the superego, insofar as you can shroud yourself behind a veil of secrecy, you will do the most. But the moral law that is unto God will always keep you on the straight and narrow, in spite of what mankind got to say. And that's why you hold on to God even though people are starving the living daylights out of you. The moral law of God is what enables you to overwhelm even your desire for food and clothes, if at all you have truly given your life to the Lord, when people are withholding it from you in order for you to walk away from who? God. So then, in reverting back to the ID, what the superego what challenge the superego poses when left alone without the superego squared, which I call God, is that mankind, if at all they can give themselves a thick enough veil of secrecy and anonymity, they will never mind default to the ego or even the superego, but to the ID. And what is in the ID? Eat, grunt, sex, defecate, basic instincts. I want it and I want it now. If there is a thick enough veil of secrecy encircling human beings, They will never mind, have no regard for the superego, but also for the ego. The thing that makes sure that when you pee in a toilet, or at least outside of your pants, will also dissipate. And so you will get exactly what you want. Whatever your drives are churning you to desire, you will gun for them to a point where you will have no regard for what the moral law demands. Seeing as society is not looking at you, and given that your heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked, who can know it? If you can give yourself a woman that does not belong to you, you will not care that she doesn't want you back. Because after all, you found her first. You saw her first. You want her. You're going to put her in your house. And if you're not regulated by God's precepts and what he has to say, understand, honeybee, bumble, sugar, la la la, pumpkin, snapples. If God Almighty is not the one regulating your feet, you will be hampered by the fact that no one else appears to care and no one is coming for your victim. So you're going to do the most, having no regard in your entirety for what God has to say and how he feels about this thing. I really hope that God gives me time before my phone overheats, because it's starting to get warm in here and my fan has stopped working, except for the one that I was carrying that was mobile. That one, I could use it, but where is it? Anyway, whatever, I will start searching for it if my phone starts to overheat. Wait a minute, my fan is working. It was unplugged. It's on now. Let me just switch it on one second. You're on. Gail, it's going. Or is this the grace of God? It could be. No. Yes, it is the grace of God indeed, but the fan was passing me shade because of the fact that either I had unplugged it or I had put it in a strange position, but now that it's on, I have peace and contentment to speak at my leisure. Even though it's getting warmer, my phone will not overheat. Okay, yeah. So the law of man, not the law, the laws of man were fashioned by their consciences, which come from the law of God written on their heart. But mankind, like I said, throughout the ages, they just develop a moral turpitude that is very exquisite. And the Lord dealt with it very hotly in the Old Testament with just excruciating judgments. So therefore, what I'm getting at is that if you want to see the Old Testament God, who is the exact same God, you will keep on ignoring the laws of your countries because you are operating within the superego, but then there is this weird, gnarly, strange, like chewy thing making like bubblegum called witchcraft. It's sticking to people just like that bubblegum, and even then in hair. And so therefore, if at all you put it in hair, somebody gotta be chopping their hair, losing all their glory. That is what under heaven your crazy, gnarly, monstrous witchcraft has achieved. You are so addicted to it, and it has so awarded you ill-gotten gain that you can't for the life of you let it go. You can't. That's you holding on to your cray-cray disposition. Listen to you. Okay. You're holding on to your sorcery. And the sorcery, you love it so much because it awards you your wildest fantasies. It gives you your biggest dreams, or rather your biggest nightmares. And what are these nightmares? These nightmares that you're hanging out with, like they're a homie, are, I'm going to get just what I want. I've always wanted it, but I know society generally frowns upon rape. So I'm gonna go and I'm gonna rape a woman, take her by force, and then put her in my house as my spouse. Yes, yeah, there was laws, but I don't care anymore for these laws, yeah? What I'm gonna do is just grab it. I'm just gonna go and grab it. I'm just gonna go eat and get nice and fatso, all by me savvy, yeah? Because nobody's watching me be a glutton, yeah? I'm gonna steal and steal. I'm going to go and rob a bank, but instead of it being a bank, it's a wealth transfer. Oh yeah. What I'm going to do is just go on right ahead and steal all the wealth of my family members, because nobody will know it. Yeah. Mamela, we be out here dealing with embezzlers, money launderers, extorters. We be out here dealing with thieves. We be out here dealing with Velcro hands, Mamela, rapists, witchcraft, makes people commit most heinous acts. But even though they have been legislated against in our countries, nonetheless have got this thick veil of anonymity around them. And so given that nobody can see, rape is whole-scale free. Murder is whole-scale free. Human sacrifice ritual. I don't like that lady, so she's got to die. What in the world? A world that is teeming at the folds with magic, science, wonders, just weird, random acts of just violence, but veiled behind the anonymity of sorcery. And so you get this random fool buffoon Baniki walking up in corporate South Africa, yeah? Hooking up a little bit of a tap dance after stealing all of his sister's money and after raping the woman that now he calls his girlfriend. But she doesn't know it, and neither does the sister know that the man has stolen his money. Randos bewitching, colleagues, Jandra, it's chaos. Spiritual chaos. It's just like people in the olden days who like a land and they just take it. Conquest, conquering. It is before the days of established national laws, international laws that give countries sovereignty, so nobody can actually be making like Napoleon Bonaparte anymore, or even like Israel and taking the land of Canaan, you will know that how it is that Israel was restored to the land. In 1948, it was given that land by the United Nations. They agreed in a charter to give that land to Israel. That's what modern day laws did. Gave people land as it was deserved by them and agree in concert that this your land belongs to these people. But back then, lands were taken by conquest. So if you want to go back to places where you take stuff by conquest, okay, Sarats. It's history, so let it repeat itself. But I understand if you're going to go and grab women's bodies by conquest, and if you're going to go and grab people's lands by conquest, if you're going to go and grab people's jobs, careers by conquest, if at all you are going to buy conquest, get yours, baby. Like you as Napoleon Dynamite, Bonaparte, or even Joshua. Okay, then let those who belong to the camp of God that have been rightly awarded a land win. Let then the best man win. Let then the Assyrians come and wreak havoc and take all of you Israelis and spread you across the streets. Because after all, did God not judge the living daylights out of you after you Rehoboam king then created a brand spanking new religion with these golden calves? Okay, I'll let the Assyrians have a field day with you. I will hand you over to the Moabites, my man. I'm giving you over to them Philistines. They're going to be doing a knowing away thing at you. I am going to let your enemies have a field day with you, because those who favor me, I will favor, and those who blaspheme my name and walk away from my precepts and no longer worship the one true God, I will then give them rather over to their enemies. I will show you Old Testament, good old-fashioned conquest. Because after all, you don't care for your charters, you don't care for your United Nations, you don't care for your Amnesty Internationals, you don't care for your criminal courts, international ones, and truly effecting real justice instead of going against Israel. You don't care for what makes for a true case tabled at the ICJ. So, Mamela, if you're gonna go and grab what you want to grab by conquest, like we are out here hanging out in 798 BC, all right, it's all good. Listen, it's right. But then the God of the Bible of the Old Testament that ought to be killing men, women, and children will also come for you. This fan is freezing me again. I turned it off. You don't get to have your bread buttered on both sides and have your cake and eat it too. You don't get to bring back good old-fashioned I'ma get it cause I want it old school barbarism where men don't go to jail for rape but they marry their rape victims. You don't get to hook up that kind of violent coup strategy and not have the God who is the only one that stood in the gap of people living in so a barbaric civilization as that come through for the minority, the beleaguered, and the afflicted. This morning I woke up to a dream from the Lord Jesus Christ where he showed me a similar conquest like that of Gideon in the Bible, who with just 300 men, but in my vision it was just 200 men, not 300. The Lord is going to overwhelm the enemies of God that have been impoverishing the people of God until they be out here threshing wheat in a winepress. The Lord showed me that this thing is going to end in a Gideon-esque type conquest. A small number of people, 200 in particular, only in praise and in worship, with a strategy that is like barley bread rolling up down a mountain and falling on the camp of the enemies of God, causing so much chaos all up in that grill, the barley bread of which being Gideon himself. Yeah, Jerubbaal. I'm sure I'm Jerubbaal as opposed to Gideon, because they said they Baal deal with you type setup thing after he destroyed that statue. That Baal statue outside of his daddy's house, Jerubbaal, otherwise known as Gideon. The Lord raised him up with 300 men, and they became that barley loaf rolling down a mountain, killing that whole entire camp of people. The Lord showed me that as opposed to it being 300 men, it's going to be 200, and that a Gideon-esque type strategy is going to set God's people free. Because if at all you're going to be as ancient in the way that you operate, because listen, you're operating within only the super ego, but without God being acknowledged. You only care about what society thinks. And since people don't see that you're doing witchcraft, you have beleaguered God's children, you have impoverished them, you know how in the days of Gideon, they took away their food, everything they planted once a year. These crazy Midianites, I believe, that's who they were. No, the Midianites were the Midianites that be actually coming up against Jeroboam and them. Or with the Midianites, I think it was the Midianites, I stand corrected, listeners to the army. No, the one where the Midianites was, I believe, Deborah. I stand corrected, listen, all these judges of Israel. I've just been listening to all these things, reading all these things, but then I lose some details. You go and you figure out in the Bible who we're talking about here. But those enemy camps that were just wreaking havoc in Israel's life were bullies.